I'm Mike Costello, and I'm here today with Dr. Ivers Freelander as usual, and we're going to talk in the next few minutes about spiritual well-being. One of the things that we spend a lot of time on this program talking about are ways in which we can enrich and empower ourselves to live more fully the lives that God created us to live and to have. We talk so often about the importance of living in our mind, and we know that the mind is a tremendous force connected to our body, and that the mind and body are connected to our spiritual well-being as well. In today's world, we use a lot of references to mind, body, spirit connection, and our movement and our church and center and those like ours believe fully and completely in this important connection between mind, body, and spirit. It's important also to realize and remember that as we share information with you, we're not being critical or judgmental of any faith tradition. And what we're doing is talking about new and different ways of thinking about life, thinking about living, and thinking about spiritual values, and integrating these teachings into all aspects of spiritual life, regardless of faith tradition or religion. And it's very important to us that we understand that, and that we not portray the idea or the thought that we're trying to convert or change anyone's way of thinking or basic understanding. But spiritual well-being is universal, and I think in today's world, we're finding so many wonderful things that have to do with interfaith action and the commonality between faith traditions. And of course, in the West, we're so immersed in Western religion and Christianity, and certainly that's our tradition as well. But we also understand that there are a lot of connections between East and West, and spirituality of the East and the spirituality of the West, and the ability to bring those together to create well spiritual being, isn't that?
Yes. Yes, and isn't that exciting? And it's a good time to be alive because in years past, since for the last 2,000 years, those who are Christians were so staunchly Christian and so absorbed in their own beliefs and non-accepting of anything else. That's interesting, isn't it? You know, I think it must have been like that in order for it to get a really good start and for it to get strong. Do you think that might be the reason?
I believe that's true. And the other issue is that everything in life is evolutionary.
Yes.
And I think Christian faith is evolving. And certainly from the time of Christ to this point, the theology has evolved. Now, we could do a whole program on Christian theology, and we're not going to do that because there's such diversity there. But, and one of the important things about our fellowship and teaching is that it's non-creedal and non-dogmatic. So we have no creed or no dogma. But we do follow the basic understandings of the Christ and the
Yeah.
Christian teaching as we interpret it and as many people interpret it today. And that calls us to an integration with other faiths. And I think Christianity is evolving to the point today of it's reaching out and understanding the commonality that it has with other faith traditions, and also the teachings of Christ, Christ Jesus, are coming into a more full understanding and realization or actualization today than they ever have over the last 2,000 years. And I think we spent 2,000 years of church history where we've intellectualized and we've dissected and we have had to have interpreted. But really where we are now is to the point of allowing the Christ-based teachings to become manifest among the people, and also the Christ-based teachings or the divine teachings to be manifest among all people of all faiths.
Yes, and isn't it a good feeling to know that we are not non-denominational, and that means we are non-judgmental, we're accepting of all other religions, but we have our own staunch beliefs, which are good for us and right for us, but we allow others to have their own ideas. I know there's a lady who's going to be speaking at the church Wednesday evening, and she's Buddhist. And you'd never know she's Buddhist unless she tells you, because she seems so Christian in her approach. But isn't that what it's all about?
It's tremendous, and it's a sign of the times. I was
Yes.
talking with some people at the church and at another center that I was speaking at recently about a group that I was introduced to that are Zen Christians. And I think you may have been
Yeah.
sitting at the table when I was talking about what a wonderful thing that was. And it is a group, and there are several Zen Christian centers around the United States now and probably in the world,
Hmm.
where Christians and Zen Buddhists have come together for the purpose of sharing meditation time.
Hmm.
Now, they're not sharing time of trying to convince each other of a religious belief, but they are spending time together on meditation. And that's a wonderful, tremendous thing. Spiritual well-being, I guess, begins from the standpoint of our being at peace, isn't it?
Yes, it would be. And to be non-judgmental, to be accepting of all others and accepting of ourselves and accepting if we have new and different ideas, to honor those new and different ideas. Because we're born into a certain family, a certain tribe, a certain group of people mold us. And whoever they are, parents, grandparents, friends, family, whoever, some children live in foster homes and orphanages, whatever molds us when we're young, we don't have to stay with that forever, but we can use that for our strength, for our backbone. But then we can also use it to see what we believe and don't believe and then go on from there. And then we need to accept that, yes, whoever is still left behind with those ideas and we might be moving in a different direction, well, that's okay too.
Mhm. Everyone is right. I think
Yes.
early on in this program, we were being interviewed by someone, and someone asked me, "What is the right religion?"
Mhm.
And I said, "All religion is right," because it's right for the people who are there at that point in time. And I think that we are led and guided to be where we need to be, and we need to give other people the respect and the understanding and the tolerance to be where they are, and to allow them to be there and allow other spiritual paths to unfold.
Totally, but also to accept for ourselves that if we see differently and we're going on a different path, then to honor that and to know that, well, that's right for us, and that we're not being judgmental about our past, our family, or whoever has been molding us, but to accept them, yes, that's right for them, but I want to look in a different direction. And I think I feel very strongly about that because I started meditating at a very young age and relative to where I grew up. And I also had different ideas on reincarnation and other ideas, which later on, if nothing proved to me the reality that what I believed was absolute truth for me, then it's just the fact that I thought of those ideas when I was very young.
Mhm. And having that openness of thought does bring us spiritual well-being. I
Yes.
think it's important when we talk about peace and we talk about the aspects of spiritual well-being. I guess that inclusiveness is tremendously important, and the understanding and the ability to explore other ways of thought, to be open and to not judge. You know, so many times people talk to me about our openness, the openness of our faith, and they'll always challenge me with something like, "You wouldn't go with and listen to so and so, or you wouldn't do this." And my response typically is, "Well, yes, I probably would, because I trust myself enough
Mhm.
to know that I know what for myself is truth and what
Mhm.
resonates for me, but that doesn't prevent me from listening to other people who have other opinions, and without judgment."
Mhm.
And so I think it's important when we look at our spiritual well-being that we be open people and that we be respective people, respective and respectful,
Mhm.
and that we be inclusive.
Mhm.
And certainly in our faith, in every faith, there are some exclusive things. There are some things that are unique to us. There are some things that are unique to people of other traditions. But it is tremendously important that we understand the need to be tolerant and
Mhm.
understanding. The other aspect, I guess, is that when we talk about spiritual well-being, we need to talk about the difference between religious well-being and spiritual well-being, because religion and spirituality are two different things.
Yes, it is. And one thing that's important to bear in mind is spiritual maturity. If we are mature, then we can accept whatever comes our way and perhaps even practice it for a bit, see how it feels, but not feeling that we're being disloyal to our own basic tenets of our own religion, of our own spirituality. But it's so joyous and so wonderful just to explore all the different facets of life, isn't it?
And spirituality is exploration,
Yes.
because spirituality has to do with the unfolding of our spiritual nature. And in order to allow that to happen, we need to have space and room to grow.
Hmm.
It's a little bit like the image that we see in Christianity of Christ Jesus, which we celebrate every Christmas, of being born in the manger in swaddling clothes. And one of the things that we teach in New Thought is that divine presence, or that picture of divinity, begins in each one of us as a little child, wrapped so tight in
Hmm.
those swaddling clothes, and then those clothes have to be loosed. And then as that presence grows and becomes mature, then it moves through various stages, and that happens within us, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And I remember you've told me that when you were very young, you went to a lot of different types of churches. You went to churches that were totally diverse in what they taught. But don't you think that was a wonderful thing that you had the incentive to do that because it shaped the non-judgmental person you are today?
That's absolutely true, and I think that from a spiritual standpoint, as we are spiritual explorers,
Yes,
and as we are growing from a spiritual standpoint, we can grow within our own circle, but we also need to grow in understanding of others
yes.
and other spiritual traditions. One of the things that I think is so wonderful today is that all of the faiths that we have from the East today that are here in the United States growing among us. And I think that we as Westerners, we as Christians have done a poor job of understanding the spiritual tenets of
Hmm.
other traditions
Hmm.
and understanding that really this thread of commonality and this thread of beauty and this thread of liberation runs through every faith.
Yes, and isn't it exciting to go to different churches? I can remember the first time I went to a Jewish temple, and I thought it was so exciting to be there because it was so different, and yet it wasn't that different. And to go to a Catholic church, because my family was never Catholic in this life, and it was exciting to be there and hear the priest. And back then they were doing all the services in Latin, and then to go to all the different types of churches, and then to go where they meditated was exciting to me because it was a totally different, and that's what I resonated to. So if we do this, if we go to all the different ones, we find that to which we do resonate from our own deep core self, but we can incorporate that in our own tenets of our own deeper beliefs and still be faithful to whatever it is we want to be faithful to in a spiritual sense.
Mhm. The other aspect that I think we need to touch on is for people who are not drawn to churches
Hmm.
or to organized religion, from a psychologically and the dynamic of our mind and our emotions and from our physical well-being, we do need to have a spiritual core, and that doesn't mean that we have to be affiliated or that we have to be labeled. And I think so many people who, for whatever reason, don't choose to be a part of organized religion still have a tremendous spiritual reservoir within them, and people
Hmm.
need to be encouraged to cultivate that and not to judge themselves as being unreligious
Yes.
by that aspect. And so many times in the church, I'll talk to people who have come to our church. And as you know, many people end up in our church and center that haven't maybe been to church for a long time. And they'll say, I never went to church or I rarely go to church, but I'm a very spiritual person.
Hmm.
And so many people have cultivated a private spiritual life. And that's tremendous and it's
Yeah.
wonderful. But those who haven't done that should be encouraged to embrace some aspect of spirituality, even in a private way.
Yes. Yes. And I think those people who are truly happy in life have done that, don't you? Because they acknowledge their own deeper spirituality and they don't need the trappings of religion and they have reasons not to want to be part of a church. And I know a lady to whom I was very close who said she couldn't abide the churchianity, so she didn't go to church and she raised a large family. And that's, to me, that's very lovely that she stayed true to her own the tenets of her own spiritual self.
Yeah. And in the midst of that, she was deeply spiritual
Yes.
and her well being from a spiritual standpoint was assured. We'd like to pause at this point of the program and offer you the opportunity to receive some literature that will help you to explore the ideas and thoughts that we're sharing with you today.
We would like to give you the opportunity to explore and discover in your own home the new thought teachings that this program is sharing with you by sending you a free copy of one of these booklets. Simply address your request to Confident Living at P.O. Box 7726, Long Beach, California 90807. Whatever your dream, whatever your vision, you can reach it through confident living.
Let's take this part of the program to talk about some practical ways to cultivate spiritual well being. I guess one would be meditation, wouldn't it?
Yes, indeed, it would be. To me, that's the most valuable because it's been valuable to me and to those persons I've taught. And people who had not meditated before and started meditating found a great peace, that peace that passeth all understanding, just through meditation. And also, meditation isn't just one thing, it's a lot of different modalities. And we can ask questions during our time of meditation and know that whatever answer comes is valid, and sometimes we need to even make notes of the answers and our questions and answers. But we can work with meditation as well as being just into a state of bliss.
Mhm. And of course, those who are maybe turned off by the aspect of meditation, we could invite them to do visualizations,
Yes.
and that's a good way to do it,
Would be
isn't
the
it?
same thing,
It's
wouldn't
the
it?
same. And so, of course, words build fences that keep us from coming together. And so visualization, and in today's stressful environment, I think it would be a benefit, and I know it's a benefit to anyone to spend a few minutes or more at least once a day, but if possible, more often, or at least once or several times a week, setting aside a time to come apart and participate in some meditation or some visualization, because it has a tremendous ability to bring us into a center of spiritual awareness.
Yes, well, visualization, of course, is what we create energy, which creates that which we wish to have to be created. And then when we are in meditation and in a state of bliss, we're attuned with Creator God,
Mhm.
and or some people call it the source of all energy, of all life, orgone energy, whatever we want to call it. We are attuned to that divine energy, and as we're attuned to it, then we take it into ourselves and use it.
Mhm. Important that we always talk about on the program when we deal with meditation is giving our listeners the difference between prayer and meditation, because so many people, especially of the Western and traditional Christian background, think, well, when you say, well,
Yes.
I meditate, well, that's just prayer, and I do
Uh-huh.
that all the time. So let's talk about the difference between prayer and
Well, of
meditation.
course, we have that cliche that's very easy to say, that prayer is talking to God and meditation is listening, and I believe it is. Prayer is when we're being grateful, expressing thanks, gratitude, asking what we want, visualizing what we want, and that's okay. But the best part is expressing gratitude
Right.
when we're thankful.
In prayer, Ernest Holmes, a founder of religious science, and Charles and Myrtle Fillmore of Unity, and Nora Brooks, and Mary Baker Eddy, and a lot of others, all talked about the importance of meditation. But one of the things that Ernest Holmes said about prayer was that the only, or well, not the only, but a very valid prayer is simply, "Thy will be done." And so when we
Exactly.
pray, we really are giving prayers often when we're conversing with God or conversing with the divine. We're, as you said, as is demonstrated in the Lord's Prayer, we're giving thanks, we're giving acknowledgement to the presence and the power of divinity and God in our lives. And then we're asking that the manifestation of God's will be done, and God's will is good and only good, and doesn't have to do with the wants or the whims of whether or not I get this job or have this healing, but instead has to do with my ability to unite myself with the presence and the power of God, and to allow God's will to come forth. So that prayer is an important aspect of life, but so often we in the West have used prayer as a pleading, haven't we, and a
Yes.
begging.
Yeah.
And of course, we could do a whole program on prayer sometime. But meditation takes us out of that realm of trying to dialogue, at least actively, and it
Exactly.
makes us passively enter into a time of silent or guided, but into reflection and allowing the voice of God to come. Now, we're not talking about the voice of God in a shout or in a verbal way, are we?
No, but in a sense, we're being co-creators with Creator God when we're in a state of meditation, because we're co-creating whatever it is we want in our lives, whether it's peace and harmony, or to manifest, or for new ideas, or guidance, whatever it might be. And then there's another step further, it's contemplation. So we're in a state of bliss, that's when we're truly in a state of bliss, and we're just being at one with Creator God. And that's when we're renewed.
Mhm. Now, in our Wednesday evening service, you spend a whole hour on meditation, don't you?
Yes, we do. We talk first during that last hour. We dim the lights somewhat and have a deep breathing time, because deep breathing is one of the most valuable gifts we can give ourselves, because it's there for us, but we have to accept it. And when we adjust our body through the deep breathing, so we do that for a bit, and then we have a brief prayer of gratitude and expectation, and then we have a little visualization sometimes, and sometimes I'm impressed to just take them almost immediately right into their silent meditation. And then they go into their silent meditation and they stay quite a long time. And then we share what we received from that silent meditation. And then we have a healing time. And the energy is palpable, it's very strong. So we have the healing time, And there's times I request the healing for myself because it's available for everyone. But whatever we ask for, we will receive. That which you ask in prayer, believing you shall receive. So it's a very wonderful thing that we create that marvelous energy, and then we send it out wherever it's most needed, or we direct it to wherever it's going to need to be sent. And as you always say on Sunday, we read the names in the prayer book on Wednesday evening that have been put in that book from the time of the previous Wednesday. And that's a very powerful service.
And it's really a meditation service, isn't
Yes,
it?
it is.
And it's a time devoted to connecting with the divine.
Yes,
And
yes. And then we use that energy, and that's a good analogy for all of life, that that energy is available to us all the time, and we have but to use it, to accept it and use it. And so we do it deliberately on Wednesday evening, but we can do it just as deliberately throughout the week in our own lives, or anyone can anytime. It's just to accept and then to use.
Yeah, the wonderful thing about meditation, I think, from my own personal experience, is that once we become good at anything, we can become good at as we exercise it, as we get better at it. And one of the things that most people are able to do once they're able to draw upon this meditative state or ability is to pause for a few moments of meditation in the midst of any circumstance or situation. And you've heard me often talk about the fact that I enter a time of meditation often in a conference room surrounded by 10 or 20 or more people when we're in the midst of very serious issues of business. And it brings to me a certain centering presence, and it also clears my thoughts, and it also opens me to be guided by divine presence and to do and say the things that I ought to say. And in these environments, there are no environments that I would ever be able to express any spiritual principles, but my spiritual well-being undergirds me to be able to be guided and directed, in this case, in a business way, to operate the businesses that we're involved with.
And isn't that lovely? And it's good to know that you are an exception in many ways, but many businessmen and women use that technique. Isn't that true?
It is very true. And even if they don't realize what it is they're using, many will pause for it. It's just like the simple advice that our mothers gave us is stop and count to 10, take a deep breath, calm down. And when we do that, we're really entering that, we're beginning to enter that, that state. But to be able to move in and out of it at will and at points of need is tremendously important and a tremendous asset to daily life.
I bet you've observed in your business life that people today are, generally speaking, are far more accepting of spirituality in their lives, the spiritual aspect of their own being, their spiritual well-being, than they were, let's say, 20 years ago.
Oh, I think that's true. People are more tolerant. The other aspect, I think, is that people, and I think from a spiritual standpoint, we understand that it's not important to articulate the spiritual aspects because spiritual laws operate in the universe, whether we see them or not, whether we name them or not, whether we identify with them or not. These techniques are available, these I don't want to say powers, but these abilities and resources are available to any of us at any time to draw upon. And yes, people are accepting of it. One of the things that people in business will say very often is, who are not spiritual or choose not to give a spiritual view to what they're doing, is that I'm very intuitive. And I think any good CEO or executive will say that the vast majority of his or her decisions are made at the intuitive level. You may have a lot of data, you may have a lot of information, you may have a lot of advisors, you may have a lot of things at your fingertip to guide you and direct you, but the ultimate decision, and probably the first decision and the last decision that you make to solve a problem, is motivated by intuition. And that comes, I think, from spiritual maturity and spiritual well-being.
Yes, and businessmen have used that idea forever. I know more than 30 years ago I was writing a newspaper column and I interviewed businessmen, and I was trying to see how they come to conclusions. And they all said, without question, I look to a higher power for my answers, for my help.
And I think you would find that to be very standard. And I think we don't talk about it, and people in business don't spend a lot of time talking about it. But spiritual well-being becomes, for those of us who are able to demonstrate and experience spiritual well-being, all of the other aspects of our life come together beautifully, don't they?
Yes. And when we have spiritual well-being, we are in that state of knowing that we're attuned to God and that we are part of God and we're co-creators with God. And then we just take it for granted and we function from that level. I was thinking a moment ago that a good analogy of spiritual well-being would be like, the analogy would be food. We take food into our bodies that's copacetic with our bodies, and then we're nourished and we have a sense of well-being. And if we take bad food into our bodies, then we lose that sense of well-being. So the same is true as of spiritual well-being, isn't it? That as we live to the highest within us individually, then we have a sense of well-being. It wouldn't matter how we're living or how we demonstrate our faith. It's if we're living to the highest within ourselves.
Absolutely. And that is the ultimate test of our spiritual well-being, of our
Yes.
well-being, period.
Yes, yes. So the analogy of the food would be the same idea. But if that would be a way for our audience to know how well they're doing.
And we are nourished by our thoughts, aren't we?
Indeed.
And our thoughts either infill us or pollute us.
Yes, I
So-
remember we used to say at the church more often than we do now, words and thoughts have molding power.
So let us careful be, knowing that we're building our eternity. We're going to
Exactly.
start doing that at church again.
That's a good idea.
Yes, tremendously important.
Because indeed we do.
And that spiritual aspect of our thinking really does outpicture what's going on inside us,
Yes.
inside our mind, and of course, we outpicture our physical bodies as well because of the way that we look.
Yes, yes, and it creates our own sense of well-being. And when we have a sense of well-being, that emanates to others, and it helps others feel good. And very often you'll hear someone say, when so-and-so just enters the room, I feel better.
Absolutely. And during this last half hour, Dr. Freelander and I have been sharing with you concepts and ideas of evaluating your own spiritual well-being. And we wish and hope for you that you will be well in mind, body, and spirit. And we hope that the information that we've shared with you has been useful, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
This program is a community outreach of Christ Church. Dr. Mike Costello speaks each Sunday morning at 11 a.m., and Dr. Iris Freelander speaks on Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. at the church. On Sunday evenings at 6 p.m., there is a meditation and healing service. Come and join us. You will be warmly welcomed.